Kate Falcha. Welcome to Irish Granny Helen. Actually, this is welcome to Psychics and Psychos. This is our preliminary look at the actual crime itself before Denise and I do the more metaphysical look. I'm laughing at the title that I wrote here, just because you'll find out. We're going to talk about a very interesting, disturbing situation that I wrote, the Kimes family. That's spelled Kimes for anyone who cares to look this up. I have a pretty thorough background information here for you, but I would recommend, if you want to see them in action, there is a Dateline episode. Trying to remember, it's been a while since I watched. I think it's Keith Morrison, which is the perfect combination. So we're going to talk about the Kimes family, namely the mother Sante and the son Kenny Jr. So Sante was actually born Santa Louise Singers, and it's actually Indian, from Asia, Indian name, and I'm sure I mispronounced the whole thing, and she changed it several times. She was born in Oklahoma, and her mother was from Dutch family, but I don't think, like, even couple of generations back, I think it Dutch ancestry, from Illinois. Her mother was from Illinois. Her father was an herbalist from the Punjab who moved to Canada, and from Canada to the United States. She had an older brother and sister and a younger sister. She, like I said, changed her name several times. As a teenager, she changed her name to Sandra. So when she was an adult, she lied about her family background. This is kind of a pattern for her. She told everybody as an adult that when she was a kid, her father abandoned the family. She was only 3, and her mother became a prostitute. The truth was that he had heart disease and died of that when she was 5. Her sister Retha reported later on, when all of this crime stuff came to the surface, that Sante had a long-term incestuous relationship with her brother Karam, and I'll give you a little hint. It's not the only one she had, allegedly. I just want to show you something. So as I was doing this, I started to realize I needed to keep a tally of criminal behavior on her part that would probably be a checklist on the hair psychopathy checklist. So I put a little star, and I have to share this because it's pretty significant. I put a little star beside everything that was in any way criminal, manipulative, or deceptive. So you see these little stars? That's page 1, and we haven't even gotten out of her teen years yet. And there's the next page. And there's the next page. And the next page. And the next page. And we're not done. So just to give you an idea of why I said this is a doozy of a story, and to call them the Kimes family is kind of an insult to the term family. But anyway, let us proceed. Her sister Retha also said that as a kid, Sante was a pyromaniac. She would light fires for fun. She lit matches under her sister's fingernails by force. So she held her down and lit matches under her sister's fingernails. She tied up family pets. They had a family farm. She tied up dogs and goats and mutilated and tortured them. Now, I wrote here in the margin that this is the most of the McDonald triad. And that's not a popular trope anymore. It used to be in psychiatry, psychology. The warning signs in a kid of disturbed behavior that might indicate worsening situations as they got older was enuresis, bedwetting, fire starting, pyromania, and animal cruelty. Well, we don't know about the bedwetting, but she had the rest. They tend not to refer to that anymore, but they kind of do. So I guess it's debated in the field. But, you know, she was showing sadistic tendencies at a very young age. So her father died, and she, her mother, her sister, when she was a teen, moved on to Los Angeles. So then there's this thing that happened, and I could not find out why it happened. I'm going to venture a guess and say her mother couldn't deal with her anymore, because when they got to Los Angeles, she was adopted by a whole other family. I mean, legally, literally adopted by Ed and Mary Chambers, and they moved with her. They took her to Carson City, Nevada. So then she goes to high school there. And in high school, she was a bully. She belittled and intimidated other kids. Got out of high school. In 1956, she married her former high school boyfriend, Ed Walker, and had one son with him named Kent. In 1961, she got caught for shoplifting and was convicted of it in Sacramento. She and her husband, boyfriend that she married, they got separated, but then they got reunited. And then in 1969, so 8 years later, they got divorced. The reality is that she didn't have a relationship, except for one, which we'll get to, which was not unstable. Walker, her boyfriend / first husband, was a contractor. In 1960, so before they got divorced, before she was arrested for shoplifting, she set fire to a house that he had built for the insurance money. So here she's doing arson and insurance fraud, but it only destroyed the kitchen, and she got $10,000 for it, which in 2025 would have been $109,000. So not bad. Over their marriage, dozens of the houses that he helped build burned down, like statistically significant numbers of things that he built mysteriously burned. She had many affairs with his rich business associates, and so they got divorced. And after they were divorced, she and Kent, their son, went to Palm Springs. In 1971, she read an article in the paper about a guy called Kenneth Keith Kimes Sr. And he was a motel tycoon. He was worth, in that time period, $20 million. And this article was about his recent divorce. She saw the $20 million, which would be the equivalent of $118 million today. He was 17 years older than she, but that didn't stop her. So now keep in mind, she saw his name in the paper. She found him. And they were married on April 5th of 1981. Kenneth Kimes Jr. was born before that. So they knew each other for a while before they got married. Their son was born in March of 75. This would be 4 years after she read about him in the paper. And then they got married 6 years later. She devoted her time to fleecing people of money, merchandise, and real estate through arson, elaborate con games, forgery, theft, and insurance fraud, usually connected, but not always, with arson. She introduced, now here's the interesting thing. Ken Sr. was aware of all this stuff and kind of was a passive participant, if that makes sense. Like, didn't report her crimes, turned his eye away and ignored it. She introduced him as an ambassador and got access to a White House reception during the Ford administration. She impersonated Elizabeth Taylor. People would come up to her and say, "Oh, Elizabeth Taylor," and she'd give them autographs. And she did look remotely like Elizabeth Taylor, kind of like a hard Elizabeth Taylor. She enslaved maids and didn't pay them. She would well, we'll go into this in more detail because I got another source of information later, but she'd go find undocumented immigrants in shelters, offer them a job, get them home and lock them in and not pay them. She offered the housing and the job to these young people and kept them with threats of going to the immigration authorities. As a result, Ken Sr. spent many years and a lot of his fortune on lawyers trying to defend her against slavery charges. In August of '85, she was arrested and she was found guilty of a federal crime of slavery and spent 5 years in prison. She also got sued in civil court and she lost by her Honolulu lawyer because they had a home in Hawaii. They had a home everywhere. Kenneth Sr. actually turned on her. He took a plea deal and kind of gave them the evidence that they needed, and then he entered alcohol treatment as part of his plea deal. That was his excuse. He and Kenneth Jr., Kenny, they lived quietly together until she was released in 1989. In 1994, Ken Sr. died of a brain aneurysm. At least that's the story. Once you get to know her background, you start to wonder, September of 1990, so back before he died, 1 year out of prison, she hired a lawyer, Elmer Holmgren, to burn her house down in Honolulu because there was a lien on it and, for all the back lawyer fees, I think. And it would have cost her $900,000 to make it good. So that would have been $2.22 million in 2025. Later, Holmgren admitted to his involvement in the insurance fraud, told the insurance investigators. In October of '90, she burned down his office to destroy the incriminating evidence that he had gathered together to give to the investigators, so there was no more documentation. Before his trial, because he admitted to this, he told his family that he was going to take a trip to Costa Rica with Sante and Kenny Sr. Kenny Sr. He was never seen again. Sante's older son, Kent, with her first husband, he wrote a book later, which I have not read, and I think it might be a really good book. I just couldn't find it at the library, called Son of a Grifter. And in the book, he says that Sante told him when they were having a fight in 1992 that she and Kenny Sr. had killed Holmgren, and what she had done is she'd hit him on the head with a hammer from the back seat. He was in the passenger seat. She was sitting behind the passenger seat. Kenny Sr. was driving. She knocked this guy on the head and they killed him, so that kind of got rid of the whole charges. The evidence was burnt down and the witness was dead. February 19th of 1991, Holmgren's body was found in Inglewood in California in a dumpster and it had multiple blunt trauma injuries to his head. The body was never identified until 2026. Too little, too late. So no charges were ever brought against them. Sante had offshore accounts in Nassau in the Bahamas. In September of 96, she and Ken Jr. drugged her banker, 46-year-old Syed Bilal Ahmed, and drowned him in the bathtub. They put his body offshore, so covering the tracks of illegally gotten gains stored in offshore accounts. No charges were brought, even though Ken Jr. later did confess to this. Sante denied it. Ken Jr. confessed to avoid the death penalty, but we'll get to that. In the 1970s, Sante and Ken Sr., because he's still around, they lived in Las Vegas houses, and not many houses, one house, and they had convinced a guy called David Kasdan, who was 63, to put his name on the deed. And I was never entirely sure why, but several years later, she convinced a notary to forge Kasdan's signature on a loan application for $280,000, which would be $553 today. And they were using his house as collateral and putting the loan in his name. Kasdan discovered all of this. I guess he found out when he got some kind of confirmation letter from the bank. He threatened to expose Sante, so she ordered Kenny Jr. to kill him. Always obeyed his mother. March 9th of 1998, Kenny Jr. shot Kasdan in the head in his Los Angeles home. There was a third accomplice who testified that all three helped dump his body in a dumpster near LAX, the airport in LA. They then disassembled the murder weapon and dropped it in a sewer, and it was never found. July 5th of 1998, which was the last day of life of a former ballerina and socialite, Irene Zambelli Silverman. And this was when she was last seen in her townhouse in New York City. So what happened to her? Well, she had this big, gigantic townhouse. It was a mansion. She married a multimillionaire. And, she was widowed. She was quite old. And she had divided parts of the townhouse into small apartments, and not a whole lot of them. And she would rent a couple of people just to augment her income. Ken Jr. became one of her tenants, and he and Sante heard about this somehow, and they targeted her. So he went and pretended under a different name to rent an apartment, and Sante sneaked in and lived there. Ken Jr., he was only there for a month. So it's coincidental that the day that Irene disappeared was also the day that law enforcement arrested Sante and Kenny Jr. on completely different issues, on charges of check fraud. Earlier in 1998, they had written a check for $14,900, which would have been almost $30,000 today. They'd written this check in Utah, and somehow they got tracked down. And it's eerie because she disappeared, and I don't know who's fooling anybody. They killed her, right? But they got it all done right before they came home, and the police arrested them on something else entirely. But then shortly thereafter, let me see, this was in July, right? Let me make sure I got this right. Yeah, July 5th of 1998. No, slightly over, it's the anniversary. So she disappeared in July. They got arrested in July, and in December they got charged with Silverman's murder. So in that period of time, about 6 months time, 5-6 months time, the police connected the dots, and they were charged with her murder, and in the year 2000 they were convicted. So what they had planned was, Junior would move in to the apartment, and Sante would hide there until they got rid of Irene, and then she would pretend to be Irene. She would assume her ID. She would take ownership of her $7.7 million mansion. They had surveilled Silverman and recorded her phone calls, and they had, excuse me, 15 notebooks with detailed fraud schemes, not just Silverman, but many other victims that they had planned that they were going to defraud. When they were arrested, Kenny Jr. had Silverman's keys, cassettes of her tape-recorded calls that they'd been eavesdropping on, loaded firearms, wigs, masks, plastic handcuffs, $30,000 in cash, which would be almost 60 now, an empty stun gun box, a drug similar to Rohypnol, a forged deed to transfer the townhouse to Sante's Shell Corporation in Nassau for the equivalent of $780,000 today, which was a fraction, a tenth of what it was worth. So Kasdan, during the trial for him, Kenny said that his mother did use the stun gun on Silverman, and Kenny strangled her. They stuffed her in a bag and put her in a dumpster in Hoboken, New Jersey. March 14th of 98, that was when Kasdan's remains were found near Los Angeles Airport. The FBI and the LAPD, they focused on the mortgage application with the forged signature that linked Kasdan to the attempted arson of the house in Vegas. This is just the most tangled web. The alleged homeowner was supposed to be David McCarran, who was a homeless guy that Sante and Kenny Jr. had forced to live in the house. He told law enforcement that Sante and Kenny Jr. lit the fire for the insurance money. And my question to myself was, why did they force him into the house? To blame him? To have him die and collect more money? I mean, just the whole thing is very, very odd. The cops found a guy called Stan Patterson, and he confessed to selling the weapon to Kenny Jr. that Kenny Jr. used on Kasdan. I guess they were able to prove ballistics. And he cooperated with the cops to avoid prosecution himself. So now they've got some substantial evidence against him. In June of 98, he had gotten a call from Sante about a New York City townhouse that she wanted to sell, and she needed his help with the paperwork, and he agreed to meet her in New York City on June the 5th, but he told the FBI about it on June the 3rd. And on June the 5th at 6 p.m., he met Sante at the New York Hilton, and in a little bit after that, about an hour later, Kenny Jr. arrived, and then the FBI and the New York Police Department immediately arrested both. So I think I wrote it down. It wasn't July the 5th. It was June the 5th. So I wrote, this Stan Patterson guy who cooperated with the FBI and the New York Police Department, he was lucky to be alive. So their first trial for the Silverman murder was in New York City, and the cops found evidence for the trial that they could use in the Kasdan case. So that would be their second homicide trial. Silverman's case was unusual because there was no body, and at the time there was a very strong belief that if you had no body, you didn't have a case. But the jury listened to what they did have, and they took one vote when they went in to sit down, and it was unanimous guilty. guilty of murder and 117 other charges, including burglary, conspiracy, grand larceny, illegal weapons, forgery, eavesdropping, and insurance fraud. The judge saw Sante pass a note to a New York Times reporter who was sitting in the courtroom during the trial. She just very brazenly passed a note. He ordered her, give me the note and don't speak to the media. And he threatened to put her in cuffs in court and restrict her phone calls to her lawyers. He said she was trying to corrupt the jury, which is no surprise. Sante chose not to take the stand, which really is kind of remarkable given her particular personality disorder. You would expect her to be her own lawyer, but she chose not to take the stand. And she chose that because the judge ruled the prosecutors could ask her about previous convictions, including her prison time for slavery. So she thought, well, that's a bad look. I won't go there. During her sentencing, Sante made prolonged statements blaming the authorities, her own lawyers for framing her. She compared the whole thing to the Salem witch trials. The prosecutors were murdering the Constitution. The judge told her to be quiet. This is not the first or the last judge to tell her to sit down and shut up. He told her that she was a sociopath and a degenerate. He said that Kenny was a dupe and a remorseless predator. They got the maximum, well, she got the maximum sentence. She got 120 years. Junior got 124, so not too shabby. In October of the year 2000, Kenny Jr. gave a prison interview to Court TV, which I haven't seen. He told, okay, so maybe they didn't air it. Come to think of it, maybe they didn't air it because while he was being interviewed by this woman reporter, he took her hostage. He held a ballpoint pen to her throat. He demanded that Sante not be extradited to California to face the death penalty in California for Kasdan's death. And after 4 hours, the reporter was able to break free. The negotiators intentionally distracted Kenny Jr. He just relaxed her hold on the pen, actually enough. She pulled away. The cops wrestled him to the ground. I mean, in the prison. In March of 2001, Jr. was extradited to Los Angeles. In June of 2001, Sante was extradited to Los Angeles. And in June of 2004, during their trial, Kenny changed his plea to guilty, testified against Sante, and the deal he made was neither one would get the death penalty. So he exposed every detail of multiple crimes and told how she indoctrinated him to be an accomplice. Sante, again, at the end of this trial, gave a big, long statement. She denied the murder. She accused law enforcement and the prosecutors of misconduct. She was ordered by the judge to shut up again. He called her one of the most evil individuals. This is a woman judge. One of the most evil individuals she had ever encountered in her time on the bench. Sante was sent to New York to continue serving her time there first and was mostly in solitary confinement, always in trouble. She appointed a guy called Brian Johnson, a family friend, power of attorney and sole intermediary with the outside world. And he struggled for years to get her a retrial, but she died of natural causes at Bedford Hills Correctional Facility for Women on May 19th of 2014. Junior is in the Richard L. Donovan Correctional Facility in San Diego. So there's just endless media stuff. I wrote down some of the most significant. Now I hear from reliable sources, I think Denise watched this. 2001, a TV movie, A Most Deadly Family. And guess who played Sante? This blows my mind. I have to watch it. Mary Tyler Moore. 2006, there was a TV movie called A Little Thing Called Murder with Judy Davis as Sante. 2009 is the Dateline episode. I didn't find the number of the episode. However, often the numbers are different from streaming service to streaming service. So it's 2009 Dateline. It's really good. And in 2015, a novel came out, Diabolical Women. Oh no, this is a movie, Diabolical Women, and in shortly after that, a novel, Depraved Indifference. So let me see here. Let me see what I've got going on here. Okay, yeah, we're good for time. I'm going to continue. I have a little bit more from another source. The Dateline episode illustrates very clearly what I wasn't the first one to think of this. Many people have alleged, and this is alleged, that there was an incestuous relationship between her and Kenny Jr. One hint, and not the only one, would be that they held hands throughout the entire interview. And they look at each other with big doe eyes, and he talks about her like his best girlfriend going to the prom. It is something else. Okay, this is from my book, The New Evil, by Michael Stone, MD, and Gary Brucata, PhD. Gary Brucata, you can look for him on YouTube crime videos. He is interviewed by everybody, guest professional expert on every show. He's really an interesting man. This is called Understanding the Emergence of Modern Violent Crime. And it's, synchronicity is just bizarre. So I've been reading this book slowly, little bit by little bit, because I have a lot going on. And the book is, I'm not kidding, about this thick. And it has a rating system that they created, cataloging degrees of evil behavior. It's not about evil people, it's about evil behavior. And they are very careful about the traits that they distinguish one level from another. So I'd only gotten about this much through the book, and I was on category, 14 or 15. And in each category, they explain in depth why they've chosen this as a category, what the distinguishing behaviors are for people in this category. Then they give you one or two breakdowns of cases that are exemplars. Well, guess who I stumbled on? They use Sante as an example. I was thrilled. So this is a psychological characterization of her based on the work of Stone and Brucato. In this book, they're parsing evil actions, not people. And what the book is categories of degrees of behavior based on consideration of the motivations of the crimes. So the concept of evil, they said, it's difficult to articulate and difficult to comprehend. But it's really worthy of serious inquiry, especially if we want to prevent evil deeds. We have to understand what causes them. In their definition, evil are actions anyone would say are depraved. So they have to be preceded by malice aforethought, and they have to cause excessive suffering, what an ordinary person would consider excessive suffering, and they have to be incomprehensible to most, parentheses, normal people. So they classified them on a scale of increasing severity they call the gradations of evil. It's a really interesting book. Sante Kimes is category 14. These people are ruthlessly self-centered psychopaths. They have an unlimited willingness to cheat, steal, whatever, to meet their personal ends. So their evil acts are pragmatic. Their schemers, tricksters, con artists. They're adept at mimicking sincerity and trustworthiness to defraud other people. Can I have your autograph, Miss Taylor? They will devote a lot of time and planning, pre-planning to ingenious plots. They're willing to work for years to build a relationship or relationships that are necessary for their plot, including false identities and, banks and lawyers. And it's just incredible. They're good at evading law enforcement, and they're good at evading detection. Their murders are self-serving, practical, pragmatic. For example, somebody who would go into a bank and just shoot the security guard just to get access. You often see them in literature and movies. They're a very popular sort of figure in entertainment of that sort because they're archetypical villains. They are the archetypical villain. They often will have a weaker ally. Sound familiar? And this ally will be loyal and have great affection for them. Often the allies will go so far as to be willing to kill for them. So the Kimes, how do they fit into this? When her father abandoned his wife and 4 kids, her mother put the children in an orphanage and became a prostitute. So there was some truth to her lie there. This is a strong message that was given to the very young Sante at the time, that it's acceptable to resort to what would be considered immoral or illegal behavior for personal gains. It's just survival. It's sort of a permission to act outside the constraints of conventional society. Kimes wandered the streets of Los Angeles when she was young. She was preyed upon. Who knows what terrible things happened to this kid. She was arrested for stealing food. Probably that was the shoplifting. That's my guess. In the 7th grade, she was adopted. Now I'm thinking, okay, her mother couldn't deal with her. She was adopted out. Her name was changed to Sandra Chambers, and she moved to Nevada. She was attractive in high school. She was a cheerleader. She was in the Glee Club, but she had a reputation for being a gigantic flirt. Her birth mother decided then that she wanted her back, and she refused to go. She was busy shoplifting and using her adoptive father's credit card without his permission. 3 months after she graduated, she married her high school boyfriend, and they got divorced in a few months. And then she remarried her other high school boyfriend, Kenny Walker. In 1960, she changed her name to Sante because she looked like Elizabeth Taylor. She played it up, and she even would write autographs. She began trading sex for money. For 2 decades, she committed arson. She engaged in insurance fraud. In 1965, she stole a new car from a dealership in a test drive, just never brought it back. Eventually, this got her charged with 17 counts of ground theft. She had more than $20,000 that she charged on fake credit cards with many aliases. She got arrested for theft again, and she got 3 years of probation. Now, keep in mind, psychopathy, one of the characteristics on the checklist is criminal versatility. In 1968, her husband divorced her. She married her 3rd husband, motel tycoon Kenneth Kimes Sr., in his early 70s. And he was in his 70s when their son Kenny was 6 years old. So I imagine how much energy did he have? She taught Kenny to lie, to steal. He became her accomplice. By college age, there is much suspicion of incest. She and Kenny Sr. were globetrotters. This is a little interesting thing that I didn't really get a good feel for, but in this psychology book, they said they had many, many homes. They actually went around, and this is like a really refined con. They went around all over the country and spoke at American civil rights groups with the purpose in mind of selling U.S. flags to schools for patriotism. She met Pat Nixon. This is how this really worked. She met Pat Nixon on purpose. She put herself in a position to meet her. She presented, a good image. And what her goal was, she wanted to weasel some sort of entree into government. She sneaked into Blair House to a party. This is the vice president's residence, a party in 1974 when Ford was the vice president. And on the basis of that, she continued to crash embassy parties in which she would introduce her husband as an ambassador. In 85, she and Kenny Sr. got arrested for slavery. And as we know, she'd gone to shelters looking for undocumented immigrants and forcing them to work for nothing under threat of deportation. And she spent time in prison. The year after she got out, he died. But she was really upset. And why was she upset? Because he didn't put her in his will. So what did she do? She decided to hide his death from his financial people, from the bank and the lawyer and she just, he was dead, but she just didn't put it in the paper and didn't let anybody know. It was natural causes, probably. She hid it from financial people. She forged his name on checks and legal documents and spent his millions. Then with Kenny Jr., they started pulling cons, writing bad checks, collecting cars. Journalists later started calling them Mommy and Clyde. They killed anybody who got in their way, including, finally, 82-year-old Irene Silverman. But the FBI was on to them, and they got caught in a sting they were set up by their ally. There's lots of incriminating evidence against them, including her practicing the forging of Silverman's signature. They actually found papers with her practicing the signature. She got 58 counts against her. I thought it was a little more than that, but there's so many trials, so many counts. Suffice it to say, she got 120 years, and he got 125. And this is just in New York. Kenny did a plea to get rid of the death penalty, and he revealed all their other crimes, including as many as he felt he needed to, including the murders. He got life. She died. She got life. She died in 2014. She never showed any remorse. She cried unfair, no fair. So according to these forensic psychiatrists and psychologists, she was a psychopath. She had no guilt, no conscience, no remorse, no empathy, socially charming, arrogant, pathological liar, criminally versatile. She was arrogant and grandiose about herself. She felt everyone else was stupid and would do her bidding. She had a strong hold over her son, and the forensic psychiatrist who was interviewed said she was like Svengali in Georges du Maurier's 1895 novel Trilby. And she made category 14 because she dominated and controlled, and her crimes were pragmatic without empathy. So that's the story of Sante and Kenny Kimes. And I urge you to look them up on YouTube. Find that 2009 Dateline episode. It's epic. It's worth watching. It's an unbelievable story. If somebody put this story in a book or a screenplay, it would be dismissed as just a little too much. Come on. You expect people to believe this? So thank you for watching my latest psychos. And Denise and I will be back very, very soon to look at the metaphysical aspects of it. And I think I'm going to talk Deborah into doing a little chat with Sante, which should be fascinating. Okay, thank you very much for watching. Oh, subscribe. Hit the notifications. Hit the thumbs up. Spread the good word. Thanks for watching. Slangfoil. Slancha.